So we announced a while back that we had got a hold of the manifesto from the guy that did the shooting in New Zealand. Now, this particular manifesto is something that we need to look at for educational purposes because we need to be educated in the mindset of those that think with this particular ideology, because it is something that possibly could save our lives. It can also help you to understand the rhetoric that they're using. And you're going to see in this particular manifesto that the same rhetoric he's using, you constantly hearing on the internet, you constantly hearing it on Fox News. Tucker Carlson speaks to a lot of these points. I mean, it's everywhere. But the key for white supremacists, white nationalists, is to not have people on their trail. So the mainstream media is not going to take their time and go through this with you. They'll give you little bits and pieces of it, but they're not going to sit here and say, let's go through this. Let's see what it's about and understand the mindset of these people. So as you see on the first page, it says the Great Replacement. It says towards a new society. And it has anti-imperialism, environmentalism, responsible markets, addiction-free community. I mean, that's a pipe dream, I guess, for him. Law and order. Oh, well, we know that didn't work out too well. Ethnic autonomy. Well, this is the thing. When people were in their own areas of the world, your ancestors came over there and they decided to mess up everything those people was doing. So you was in your little space. Now you want to complain about diversity. Okay. Protection of heritage and culture and workers' rights. Now, the workers' rights part is quite funny, too, because you see even in the United States of America how they constantly complaining about jobs and, manufacturing jobs closing, yet their own people are the ones that's closing the factories, that's doing all these things to them. But let me continue. So he gives a poem here. Don't really care about that. So introduction. He says it's the birth rates. And there's one thing I want you to remember from these writings is that the birth rates must change. Even if we were to deport all non-Europeans from our lands tomorrow, the European people will still be spiraling into decay and eventual death. So what he's saying here, just from the rip, that we are dying out and we don't know what to do to stop it. Now, he says every day we become fewer in number, we grow older, we grow weaker. In the end, we must return to replacement fertility levels or it will kill us. Okay. Now, earlier he just said no matter we deport all basically non-whites, it's not going to stop anything. So he said to maintain the population of people must achieve a birth rate that reaches replacement fertility levels in the Western world. This is roughly 2.06 births per woman. There's not a single Western country, not a single white nation that reaches these levels, not in Europe, not in Americas, not in Australia or New Zealand. White people are failing to reproduce, failing to create families, failing to have children. But despite the sub-replacement fertility rate, the population in the West is increasing and rapidly. How is this possible? Mass immigration and the high fertility rates of the immigrants themselves are causing this increase in population. We are experiencing an invasion on a level never seen before in history. Millions of people pouring across our borders legally, invited by the state and corporate entities to replace the white people who have failed to reproduce, failed to create the cheap labor, new consumers, and tax base that the corporations and states need to thrive. The crisis of mass immigration and sub-replacement fertility is an assault on the European people that, if not combated, will ultimately result in the complete racial and cultural replacement of the European people. But what he's not trying to tell you is it is his people that are allowing all the people that he's talking about to flood the countries. Why don't he be honest and say that it was the West? And when they say the West, they mean European powers. Why don't they say the West is the one that went and got Libya the way it's at today? Well, all the people were running out of Libya because it was one of the richest countries in Africa. Why don't he say, because of what happened in Iraq that caused mass immigration? Syria, mass immigration. You get what I'm saying? They never want to trace it back to when they destabilize these countries. OK, and they all work on one accord to do so. Now, he's not going to blame the corporations that's owned by people that look like him that go to, and as I posted the other day, they go to places like Mexico, China, Taiwan, any of those places that I'm just mentioning, India. They put up their manufacturing there. They're making hell over foot, trust me, in profits. They ship it back over here to America, and then they mark it up like it was made in America. For example, Apple. Apple don't have a single factory here in the United States of America. Apple moved all the operations to China, and they're going to ship them iPhones right here to the U.S. We're going to buy the iPhones like it was made by American workers. They're not going to blame Tim Cook at Apple. They're going to blame people that come across the border who don't really have much of nothing. Now, I understand the issue with immigration, legal immigration, but in the instance of what he's talking about, I have to talk about it just on face value. It's just that simple. Now, he said that they don't have no European nation that can be at replacement level. Now, this is going to be right here. This is coming from the World Bank. Okay. Now, the World Bank keeps up with birth rates. Now, so I just want you to see now birth rates in itself dropped dramatically mostly throughout the world. But we're going to point out some of the white countries just by scrolling through here. So we see Albania, as he stated, 1.7. He says 2.06 is what he's talking about. Algeria is not white country, definitely Angola, Antigua and Barbuda. Argentina, even though that's a Latin country and they have tried to really wipe out all the black people, that's still 2.3. But Armenia, you look at that, 1.6. You got Aruba, Australia, Austria. We just keep scrolling down. Belgium. Now, Belgium was the one that enslaved the Congo and was cut, the brothers and sisters' hands off if they didn't meet their quota. And see what happened to Belgium. See, God don't like ugly. Now, you look at an African country like Benin. You think they're complaining? Their birth rate is 5.0. I also want to point out some of these African nations, okay, as we go down. Let's see here. Bosnia and Herzegovina. You know what I'm talking about. I got tongue-tied. Okay, 1.4. Botswana, 2.7. Brazil, that's at 1.7. That's interesting. As we go down, Bulgaria, look at that, but Burkina Faso, 5.4. Burundi, 5.7. Cabo Verde, Cambodia, Cameroon, 4.7. See, the Canada, he's saying about predominantly I'm going to say white people run the country. So we're going to say 1.6. Central African Republic, 4.9. Chad, 5.9. You're looking at, some of these, China, 1.6. They are actually dying out as well. The only thing you won't see this fast because they have so many. So you got Chile is the same thing. Let's see here as we scroll down. Colombia, interesting part. And so it's also happening in Latin America too, to a point. As you can see, the Congo, 6.1. The Democratic part, Republic of Congo, 4.7. Croatia. So the guy, Cyprus, you're just kind of going through it. Looking at it here. So the guy basically, according to these numbers, Eritrea, see where they're at. Eswatini, Estonia, look at the difference. Finland, France, French Polynesia. So Gabon, the Gambia. You're just looking at Germany, the Ghana. So basically the guy was telling the truth in the manifesto about the birth rates. Now, what he don't say and what he don't try to correlate, okay, is why is it that only this is happening in Western nations? Let's say it like that. Why don't he answer that question for himself? You see, they always try to scapegoat everything they're either doing to themselves or something that just happening specifically to them on other people. It's those immigrants. They're coming in. They're causing the problem. Diversity is the problem. You get what I'm saying? Instead of saying, okay, let's study this. Why is it we aren't having children? Now, some of them may say, well, it's because of feminism. Well, feminism is a creation that's birthed out of oppressing the women in their group. They chose to oppress white women to the point that white women couldn't do anything. So white women, they needed feminism. Just if you study history, they needed feminism. Then on top of that, they approved abortion. Okay. Yes, we talk about abortion in the black community, but understand the biggest proponents of abortion are Western women. Let's call them like they like to talk. Western women. They're the biggest ones that want to push Planned Parenthood, and they get more abortions than any other group because there's more of them. If you look at the percentage and they say, watch that word percentages. Oh, black women get this many. It's not that many black women in the United States compared to white women. So when you look at those numbers, that is why Trump and Republicans are literally trying to end Roe versus Wade. It's not because they're doing it for some moral thing. They're trying to end it because they want to end abortion to save their population. Okay, so you have to understand that. Now he gives little links here and there to check out the statistics, in which we can go to that if that's what you want to see. I guess let's play with it for a minute. Well, I guess it don't really show anything. I guess. Let's get back here. All right. So we ain't clicking on links so you'll mess us up. So he says that this is white genocide. Now you hear that term a lot from them. And understand, they always talk about black people. Oh, blacks are always complaining. Blacks are always whining. If you guys really go out and subscribe to all the white nationalist channels and just listen to them for a week, it's nothing but crying. It's nothing but whining. It's like, what are you whining and crying for? You run the government, you run the treasury, you have the military, the world loves you. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, if anybody should be, quote unquote, whining and crying, it should be African Americans. I mean, we hate it everywhere we go. People are always trying to think they can disrespect us. I mean, just so forth and so on. The history that we had 3 churches burned down that was, historic black churches, but you have one church that burned down and you crying. You get what I'm saying? So it's just amazing. So he said this is white genocide. That's what they keep saying. And you hear that term over and over and over and over and over. They do not at all experience anything that's related to genocide. So he says to return to fertility levels is priority number 1, but it's no simple task. There's a myriad of reasons behind the decline in fertility rates and destruction of the traditional family union. We must, correct the disaster of the hedonistic and nihilistic individualism. Well, I mean, you guys, that's kind of the society that you led. He said, but it will take some time we do not have due to the crisis of mass immigration. No, the crisis is not having children. That's the crisis. Immigration isn't it. But see, they're thinking, war tactics. They're thinking the more numbers we have. This is the thing. When you look at history and the way they came to power, they fear that if they aren't in the leadership, they fear that if they are the minority, then people would do to them what they've done to others. So that's why he said this is, crisis, mass immigration. Now, he said, due to mass immigration, we lack the time, scale required to enact the civilization paradigm shift we need to undertake to return to health and prosperity. Okay, mass immigration would disenfranchise us, subvert our nations, destroy our communities, destroy our ethnic minds, destroy our cultures, destroy our peoples, long before low fertility levels ever could. Thus, before we deal with the fertility rates, we must deal with both the invaders within our lands and the invaders that seek to enter our lands. We must crush immigration and deport those invaders already living on our soil. Is not just a matter of prosperity, but survival of our people. So he says that basically immigration, and this is why it's such a hot topic to Trump's base, because they are literally following this playbook. Okay, if you want to understand the base of Trump, this is it right here, what this guy is saying. And that's how they feel about it. Now, he said he want to answer possible questions. He said that he was a 28-year-old Western man, born in Australia, working class, low income family. So basically he come from struggle. Now, let me tell you something else about that. Your biggest racists that I've seen come from that background that he stated, working class, low income. And when they see a successful person, especially a black person, that have more than them, that gets through them. And you know why it goes through them? Because they understand this whole country is built for their benefit. It runs for their benefit. So if you look at black people, if we do anything outside of that, and we, even though we have so much thrown against us and we still make something of ourselves, within people like him heart, it's like, wow, they did it even though we have thrown so many curveballs at them. What about me? I have the whole system set up for me and I can't do crap. So he said his parents are Scottish, Irish, and English stock. He said he had a regular childhood without any great issues. He stated he had little interest in education during his schooling, barely achieving a passing grade. He said he didn't attend a university as he had no great interest that offered anything the university had to study. He said he worked for a short time before making some money investing in BitConnect. Then he used the money from the investors to travel. More recently, he said he'd been working part-time as a cabal removalist. He said, I'm just a regular Western man from a regular family who decided to take a stand to ensure a future for my people. Now, to have a future for your people would be to do what you said earlier. It would not be to kill people. It would be to be a family creation activist in your community, pushing for love in your community. That would actually secure your future that you're afraid of. Harming people is not going to bring those fertility rates back. It's going to make people like upset with you, upset with your group. It's going to make people call you racist, terrorists, and everything else. So if you understand the problem of fertility, then you're doing everything opposite. Okay. And then if you was actually having children, immigration wouldn't be your issue. Now, do you really understand why they're immigrating all these people in? They understand that you're not having children, right? So these corporations need workers. They need workers for countries to keep going. So they're immigrating low-skilled workers. They're not immigrating a lot of high-skilled work, but low-skilled workers to make sure that when you guys can't fill jobs, they have people that's right there ready to fill these jobs. Okay, so they say, why did you carry out the attack? He said, to most of all, show the invaders that our lands will never be their lands, our homelands are our own, and that as long as a Western man still lives, they will never conquer our land and they will never replace our people. Natural selection is doing that. I mean, you're admitting it's yourself that you can deport everybody today and you still would not survive. Okay. So he says to take revenge on the invaders for the hundreds of thousands of deaths caused by foreign invaders in European lands throughout history. He won't take revenge of enslavement of millions of Europeans taken from their lands by the Islamic slavers. He wants revenge of the thousands of European lives lost of terror attacks throughout European lands. Well, let me ask you a question about this. Okay. What about all the lives that the Western people cause to be lost? What about the slavery done to all these different groups of people you have enslaved? Well, what about that, especially the African? Well, what about that? You see, we don't act that way. See, black people are a very peaceful group of people. See, we're not sitting there thinking about we want to harm other people, even though, black people should be having more chip on their shoulder than anybody else. So he says he wants to incite violence and retaliation and further divide between the European people and the invaders currently occupying the soil. He said he wants to avenge those European men and women lost in a constant, never-ending war of European history who died for their lands. Like, you can't avenge people, like, really. But let's get down to further things. He said he wants to drive a wedge between nations of NATO that are European and the Turks, and also to make a part of the NATO forces, thereby turning NATO once more into a united European army and pushing the Turkey once more back into a true position of a foreign enemy force. Now, he said he also wanted to create conflict between two ideologies within the United States on the ownership of firearms in order to further the social, cultural, political, and racial divide within the United States. He said this conflict over the Second Amendment and the attempted removal of firearms rights will ultimately result in a civil war that will eventually balkanize the U.S. along political, cultural, and most importantly, racial lines. This balkanization of the United States will not only result in the racial separation of the people within the United States, ensuring the future of the white race on the North American continent, but also ensuring the death of the melting pot pipe dream. Furthermore, the balkanization will also reduce the USA's ability to project power globally, and therefore ensure they will never again can such a situation as the U.S. involvement in Kosovo ever occur again. So if you remember, after he did that, we know the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she banned every gun that he used. That was she banned. Of course, anytime some mass shooting happens, is always a great debate. Now, I'm going to tell you something. A lot of times you guys, when I talk about things throughout the diaspora, and I say we are a African diaspora channel, and some of you say, no, we ain't care about them in Africa. Now, listen something. When the New Zealand shooting happened, that happened in New Zealand, didn't happen in America. But notice all the Western nations were sad. Did you notice that when that happened? Anything that happens in their nations, it shuts the world down. They all clicked in globally. And this is what black people have to understand. We have to be clicked in globally. So if it happens in Africa, we sad. If it happens here, we sad. If it happens in black person in Europe, we sad. No matter where we're at, we should have the same feeling. And that's the way they are. But unfortunately, you guys need to see that they're not together as you think. Okay. So he says, what do you want? He said, ensure the existence of our people and a future for white children. That's the so-called 14 words that they always state. OK, now they asked, he said, was there a particular event or reason you decided to commit a violent attack? He said there was a period of time, 2 years prior to the attack that dramatically changed my views. Period of time was from the beginning. And he gives a time period. He broke down, certain things. We're not going to read everything that he's saying here. He's just talking a bunch of crap. Like they always say, okay, who do you represent? Millions of European and other ethno-nationalist people that wish to live in peace among their own people, living in their own lands, practicing their own traditions to decide the future for their own kind. So are you part of any political group or movements? He says he's not a direct member of an organization or group, though I have donated to many nationalist groups and have interacted with many more. Now he says here that the groups, you support or align with order or promote your attack. He says no. He says no group ordered my attack. I decided, basically decided himself. And though he contacted the Knights Templar for a blessing in support of the attack, which was given. So, we got to look at these names, look into these groups, right? He said, do these groups hold power over who are the people in these groups? So he said, he's telling about the number of people in the group in the millions. He said there's many groups. He said from every walk of life. He's in every employment field, but disproportionately employed in military services and law enforcement. Now, that's it. That's right there. And we know we have said race soldier, race soldier, race soldier. He said that they are many of them in law enforcement and military. Yes, we know that. That's why we see the killings we see about black people. There's been many brothers and sisters that served in the military and saying how racist a lot of them are in the military. So that's definitely, the truth. He says, unsurprisingly, ethno-nationalists and nationalists seek employment in areas that serve their nations and community. I would estimate the number of soldiers in the European armed forces that also belong to nationalist groups to number in the hundreds of thousands, with just as many employed in law enforcement positions. You see, guys, CNN is not going to read that to you and let you know how many times that we have seen like white nationalists be exposed. FBI talked about how white nationalists have infiltrated law enforcement. That was way back in 2006 that came out with that report, right? So this is something that we all need to pay attention to and look at their tactics and how they do things. Now, he said, did you carry out the attack for fame? He said, no. Didn't carry out the attack for fame would be laughable. He said, after all, who can remember the name of the attackers of September 11th in New York? He said about the Pentagon. He talked about all that. He said he'd be forgotten. He said, which you don't mind or whatever, right? Why did you target those people? They were an obvious, visible, and large group of invaders from a culture with high fertility rates, higher social trust, and strong, robust traditions that seek to occupy my people's lands and ethnically replace my own people. So basically, he was jealousy of them. He was jealous that they had culture, because let's call it what it is. His culture has been made up of what they have taken from other people. He's upset that they can have children. He said that they have a higher social trust and strong, robust traditions that seek. He said they're not seeking to occupy nobody's land. You just feel uneasy about people who actually got themselves together. Say how long he planned an attack. He said he did 2 years. He said, why did you choose this time to attack? He said, best time, to attack was yesterday. The next best time is today. Okay, so you talking about, he said the plan to allow enough time to train, form a plan, settle my affairs, write down my views, then enact the attack. So he said he was training. Okay. So he said that he could have chose, any weapons or means. He talked about a field rental van, household flower, and your method dispersion and ignition. Source. He talked about. So he's just being a savage, right? I'm just showing you that. And he talking about the Second Amendment. U.S. is torn into many factions by the Second Amendment along state, social, cultural, most important, racial lines. So everyone knows outside this country that we are extremely divided based on racial lines. Now, he said, why did you choose New Zealand as a place to attack? He said it wasn't an original choice. He said he arrived in New Zealand to live temporarily while he planned and trained, but soon found New Zealand was a target-rich environment as anywhere else in the West. He said, secondly, attacking New Zealand, bringing attention to the truth of the assault on our civilization. So, he just more savage behavior. Talked about here, was there any reason you attacked that, those mosques in particular? He talked about his main target, XYZ, same old, more Neander's thugging. He said, do you consider this a terrorist attack? By the definition, then yes, it is a terrorist attack. But I believe it's a partisan action against an occupying force. So, yes, it was a terrorist attack. Now, if he'd have did this in America, they would have just said he had mental illness. But they did call it a terrorist attack in New Zealand. So I'd have to give them a shout out for that. They say, do you feel any remorse for the attack? He said, no. I only wish I could have killed more invaders and more traitors as well. See, so this is what this guy is saying, okay? He said, do you personally hate Muslims? He said, a Muslim man and woman living in their homelands? No. He said, Muslim man and woman choosing to invade our lands, live on our soil and replace our people? Yes, I dislike them. The only Muslim I truly hate is the convert. Those from our own people that turn their backs on their heritage, turn their backs on their cultures, turn their backs on traditions, and become blood traitors to their own race. These I hate. So that's what he says. He said, do you hate, personally, foreigners or other cultures? He said, no. He spent many, time in different nations. We paraphrase him, of course. He traveled to a few small exceptions. He said he was treated wonderfully, often as a guest and a friend. Yeah, everywhere you go, you treated right. And you still want to get mad and be pissed off. So he said, do you believe those you attack were innocent? There are no innocents in an invasion. All those who colonize other people lands share guilt. You have to understand, you're dealing with something that most of you not really ready to grasp mentally. When you look at the white supremacists, you just not really grasp that. They aren't like the rest of us, okay? They're not. And this is why they are extremely dangerous. And we allow them to run around our country in the military. We let them to run around our country in law enforcement or just run around, period. And we allow them to run around owning guns. You understand? At any given moment, they can set something off. And we don't realize the ticking time bomb that we have in our society. Okay, so they say, did you commit the attack to receive media coverage and to propagate your own writings, beliefs, and ideas? He said, no. He said, the attack was the end of itself. He said, with all necessary effect required. He said, he intended to survive the attack. Now, it's interesting. He said, yes, as you can see, he intended to survive that. Now, you know that if a black person is pulled over by the police, you know, and I know, that we could lose our life looking at the cop wrong or sneezing or flinching. We'll get the cop to unload bullets in us. But how many times have we seen these mass shooters kill up a bunch of people that is Western people like themselves, and they go get Burger King and, they walk out and with handcuffs and like nothing ever happened. It's just how it is. That's why he expected to survive. He said these situations are chaotic and virtually impossible to control no matter the planning. Survival was a better alternative to death in order to further spread my ideals. by media coverage and deplete resources from the state by my own imprisonment. He said, was the attack racist in origin? Fertility rates are innately tied to race. So yes, there was a racial component to the attack. Why did CNN post this? Why did CNN say that this was a racist attack? And he's saying it's a racist attack because he can't have children, or his group isn't having children. So he went on a racist attack. You see what the media likes to hide from us, ladies and gentlemen? Was the attack xenophobic in origin? Fertility rates are cultural. There is no denying that. So there's a war of cultures being fought by the invaders, and my attack was a response to this, though I hold no great fear or distrust of other peoples. He said, was the attack Islamophobic? And he talking about Islamic nations have high birth rates. He keep going back to the birth rates. His whole thing that he's pissed off about is that they can't have children. He said, was the attack anti-immigration in origin? He said, yes, by all doubt. Okay, so there you go. He said, was the attack anti-diversity in origin? He said, no, the attack was not the attack was not an attack on diversity, but an attack in the name of diversity to ensure diverse peoples remain diverse, separate, unique, undiluted, and unrestrained in cultural and ethnic expression of autonomy, right? So he said, did you intend to kill police officers and other enforcers of the state? He said no. So he didn't want to kill no police. He didn't want to do any of that. It say, if you survive, do you intend to go to trial? Yes, and plead not guilty. The attack was a partisan action against the occupying force, and I'm a lawful uniform combatant. Even though he did this, he said he's going to plead not guilty. So were there other targets in your attacks? And many, one thing that can be said about the current state of the West, they will live in a target-rich environment, traitors and enemies abound. Say, were or are you a racist? Yes, by definition, as I believe racial differences exist between peoples, and they have a great impact on the way we shape our societies. So he admits it was a racist attack. He admits he is a racist. Now, why CNN didn't say the racist attack? Why didn't CNN dive into the mindset of this guy, okay, and focus on those birth rates? Focus on what he's saying here, because this is something that they all keep saying, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, it has nothing to do with black folk. It has nothing to do with Arabs. It has nothing to do with Native Americans or any other group. What's going on in their group about birth rates? Now, we could talk about birth rates all day long, but let's call it what it is. Those of us who know spiritually what's going on, when you can't have children is because the womb is cursed by God. Okay. We talking about the collective. We ain't talking about individuals. It's cursed because you have not repented of your sins, and your sins have came up high before God. And that's just one way of judging you. But many parts of the judgment is still coming. And so this is why I tell people that they're going to get more and more violent, because they don't know any other way to be but violence. Okay. When they can't solve their problem, let's go to violence. That's just, if you study their history, if you study Western culture, that's usually how they always try to solve their problems, through violence, not diplomacy. Okay. So they asked him, he says, are you a xenophobe? He said, no culture scares me. Asked him, he's an Islamophobe. He says he's not afraid of Islam. He said, are you a nationalist? Yes, probably an ethno nationalist. He said, well, are you a Nazi? He said, no. He said, no. He said, actual Nazis do not exist. Whatever. He says, are you an anti-Semite? He said, no. He said, a Jew living in Israel is no enemy of mine, so long as they do not seek to subvert or harm my people. Were or are you a neo-Nazi? He said, that's a very broad category of people. And definition is fuzzy at best, so no, you don't believe. He said, were you a conservative? He said, no, conservatism is corporation in disguise. He said, were you a Christian? He said, it's complicated. He said, were you a fascist? He said, yes, for once the person that would be called fascist is an actual fascist. He said, I am sure the journalists would love that. So the man admits he's a fascist, and CNN, MSNBC, Fox News and nothing didn't put out this man admit what he is. Okay. He said, was there a political figure or party in history you most associate with? He said, Sir Oswald Mosley. He said, are you a homophobe? He said, no. He said, he simply don't care that much what gay people do. He said, are you right wing? Depending on the definition, sure. He said, are you left wing? Depending on the definition, sure. There's no such thing as left wing or right wing. There's only white supremacy. He said, are you a socialist? Depending on the definition, worker, ownership of the means of production. He said, it depends on the worker, who the workers are, the intents, who currently owns the means of production and intents, and who currently owns the state and its intents. He said, were you or are you a supporter of Donald Trump? He said, as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, sure. As a policymaker and leader, dear God, no. All right, so you heard that. He said that he liked the symbolism of Donald Trump, of white identity and common purpose. He said, were or are you a supporter of Brexit? He says, yes, though not for the official policy made. The truth is that eventually people must face the fact that it wasn't a thing to do with the economy, that it was the British people firing back at mass immigration, cultural displacement, globalism. That's a great and wonderful thing. He said, were or are you a supporter of Front National? He said, no, they're a party. You say you see all that mess there. Okay, say by living in New Zealand, aren't you an immigrant yourself? He said yes, and it seems we immigrants seem to bring a lot of hosts of issues. Now, he admit that he's an immigrant himself. Okay, and we know in that part of the world, New Zealand, Australia, they wasn't the original inhabitants or indigenous to that land at all. I mean, if you study the history. So they are invaders. As you can see here, it says, are you intolerant? He said, sure. The last virtues of a dying nation are tolerance and apathy, and I want none of it. He said, how did you develop, research, receive your views and beliefs? Oh, a great deal of time. He said, from a great deal of places. Yeah, he says, where did you receive research to develop your beliefs? The internet, of course. You will not find the truth anywhere else. He says, there a particular person that radicalized you the most? Yes. The person that influenced me above all was Candace Owens. Let's repeat that again. The person that influenced me above all was Candace Owens. Each time she spoke, I was stunned by her insights, and her own views helped me push further and further into the belief of violence over meekness. Though I will have to disavow some of her beliefs, the extreme actions she calls for are too much, even for my taste. So he put Candace Owens. That's why they asked her about, this guy in the congressional hearing. So he talked about the video games. He talking about Spyro the Dragon. I don't really believe that. He said, do you hold any of these views? He said, no, when I was young, I was a communist, then an anarchist, and finally a libertarian before becoming an eco-fascist. So what do you consider white? Those who are ethnically and culturally European. What do you consider non-white? Those who are not ethnically and culturally European. It says, what are your beliefs given to you by your family, friends, etc.? Said, no, those around, I guess he meant to say me were the typical Australians, apathetic, and for the most part apolitical, only showing motivation in matters of animal rights, environmentalism, taxation. He said he's not partisan. Asked me if he have any other ties to partisans, freedom fighters, ethno soldiers. He said, he's telling you who he supports, who he stand by. He said, were your beliefs influenced by other attackers? He says, Dylan Roof. The writings of Dylan Roof, and Dylan Roof is the guy that killed the 9 parishioners at the Mother Emanuel Church, which was very, very sad. We interviewed one of the parishioners' daughter on our main The Advice Show TV channel. He said, if convicted, he said, you expect to stay in prison? He said, yes, until I'm either killed, released, or no time passes in the greater situation of obvious defeat of our people. Now I'll commit suicide. Happy in the knowledge I did my best to prevent the death of my race. Okay. So he said, why do you believe you will be released from prison? He said, I do not just expect to be released, but I also expect an eventual Nobel Peace Prize. This guy is, oh man, he won a Nobel Peace Prize as awarded to the terrorist Nelson Mandela once his own people achieved victory and took power. This guy is a loony. It is loony. He said, why do you care so much about Europe? Aren't you Australian? He said, Australia's like the rest of the colonies of Europe. It's simply offshoot European people. We'll let you know that. So now 2. Let me see here. Try to see what number we on here. Answers to my people supported questions. What are your views? He said he's an ethno-nationalist, ethno-fascist. Who do you follow? So we're going to try to speed this up a little bit, guys. Who do you support? He said those who wish a future, so the 14 words. They asked him, are you a Fed? He said no. He said, what are your wishes? Same thing, 14 words. We'll add a little bit to it. He said, what do you encourage us to do? Make your plans, get trained for them, get equipped, and then act. He said, next one here about his writings. Like he said, answer to detractors and those who oppose the belief methods that want your attack do more harm than good. He said, no, there isn't a successful, influential, grand movement established just yet, and no leading organizations. So he's talking about this. They want your attack result in a call of removal of gun rights from whites in the United States. He said, yes, that is the plan all along. You said you would fight to protect your rights. The Constitution will soon will come the time. So what he wants is these people to basically try to start a civil war. If you watch Fox News sometimes, because see, I have to watch everybody. I can't just watch one news outlet. If you pay attention, they keep mentioning the term civil war, civil war, civil war, and even just saying that you should be looked into. You know what I'm saying? But they be saying this because, once again, as I told you, they don't know how to solve their problems with diplomacy. Now, they talk about want to attack results in calls for gun removal, in New Zealand. And he talks about which it did happen. He said, you're a bigot, racist, xenophobe, Islamophobe, Nazi fascist. Say compliments get you nowhere. That isn't a question. And then he goes, to, all that time I read, solid crap there he's talking about. Democracy is the only solution. Why are you committing, to force? He said democracy is mob rule, and the mob itself is ruled by enemies. He's talking about that. So they say violence is the answer by using force. There's no nation in the world that wasn't founded or maintained by the use of force. Force is power. History is the history of power. Violence is power, and violence is the reality of history. Wake up. That's exactly what they believe. They run every society they're in charge with by violence. This is why, like I said, you'll see the police. They want to commit mass violence against black people because they want us to feel powerless. That's why they go the extra mile to, if they don't kill us, they go the extra mile to beat us. If they don't go the extra mile to beat us, then they go the extra mile in the courtroom to give us more time than anybody else. That's meant to take away any kind of power you think that you may have to buck at them in the system. Okay. So it says, what makes you think that you have all the answers? Say he don't. He said, what makes you think you believe you can speak for a group? You should speak for my views and ideals. Okay, so he said, what makes you believe you're European, not just an Australian? He talks about that. He said, what makes you believe there's racial differences and that those differences matter? He's talking about the research or whatever else. More blaming of, he said he blame immigrants and capitalism. He's, talking about why he's attacking immigrants. He said, why attack Muslims if half-a-third immigrants are the issue? He talks about that. It's real silly. He said, why focus on immigration, birth rates, and climate change is such a huge issue? He said, because they are the same issue. The environment is being destroyed by overpopulation. He said, we Europeans are one of the groups that are not overpopulating the world. The invaders are the ones overpopulating the world. Kill the invaders, he says, kill the overpopulation, and by doing so, save the environment. Well, if it is too populated, then I don't know, natural selection is kind of doing its thing. It said, if you believe we need to correct the white birth rate, why didn't you start a family, do it yourself? Now, see, he's asking logical questions to himself. He said, because we do not destroy the invaders first, our own birth rates would mean nothing. We do not have the birth rates to fight them at their game, nor should we, as is ultimately destructive to nature and culture. So I took matters into my own hands. Yeah, but the thing is, he could have been a family creation activist for Europeans, and he chose not to do so. So really, everything that you tried to do, you just want some violence jumping off. So then your attack just resulted in the vilification of ethno-nationalists and racial autonomous. He said, no, people forget my motivations quickly and only remember the attack itself. Don't believe me. Can anyone tell you the motivation of Madrid train bomber attackers? I'm going to tell you why. Because when people leave manifestos like this, the media doesn't take the time to go through it. That's why people forget. They don't get to go into the mindset of these people. That's why. He said, no, listen, he said, children are always innocent. Do you think you are a monster for killing an innocent? He said, invaders do not say children. They become adults and reproduce, creating more invaders to replace your people. They grow up and vote against your people's own wishes for the interests of their own people and identity. They grow up and take the potential homes of your own people for themselves. They occupy positions of power, remove wealth, and destroy social trust. Any invader you kill of any age is one less enemy your children will have to face. Would you rather do the killing or leave it to your children, your grandchildren? See, and this is why right there. Now, remember he said that a lot of them are in police departments. Now, how many times have we seen police treat our children like grown men, beat our children? This is their mindset. They don't look at our children as innocents because that's their, like I said, this guy whole manifesto is their playbook. That's why I want to take the time out and do this. It's literally their whole mindset right there. Now, we'll scroll through that. He said to conservatives, asking said, what has modern conservatism managed to conserve? A bunch of whining here, about conservatism, talking about the Christians, but, to Antifa, Marxist, communists, I don't want to convert you. I don't want to come to an understanding. Egalitarians and those who believe in hierarchy would never come to terms. I don't want you by my side. I don't want to share power. I want you in my sights. I want your neck underneath my boot. See you on the street, you anti-white scum. So Antifa is something that the white nationalists don't like. So they fight against each other. We want to make sure that we point that out. So understand they have an internal social class war within themselves more than what you think. You say to the Turks, they talk about that. Okay. General thoughts and potential strategies. Who is to truly blame? They say the people who are to blame most are ourselves, European men. Thank God you finally said who was to blame for your problems. But yet you didn't want to talk to European men about your problems. You want to go get mad at people having kids. It says strong men do not get ethnically replaced. Strong men do not allow their culture to degrade. Strong men do not allow their people to die. Weak men have created a situation. Strong men need to fix it. So, okay, he blames his own people. Now he talks about the rape of European women invaders. Many of you already know about the rape of British women by the invading forces. And he talks about these rape cases, but yet why don't he talk about all the pedophilia cases done by his people? Why don't you talk about that and all the raping and pillaging they do? But that's here not there. No one supports rape. Rape is horrible no matter who does it. It is. So he goes through all that, talking about killing rapists and hanging their families. Like, okay. He said diversity is weak. So he says, why is diversity said to be our greatest strength? Does anyone even ask why? It is spoken like a mantra and repeated ad infinitum. I don't know what he's saying here. Diversity is our greatest strength. Diversity is our greatest strength. Diversity is our greatest strength. He said throughout the media and spoken by politicians, educators, but no one seemed to give a reason why. Why give a nation strength? And how does diversity increase that strength? What part of diversity causes this increase in strength? No one can give an answer. Meanwhile, diverse nations across the world are scenes of endless social, political, religious, and ethnic conflict. The United States is one of the most diverse nations on earth, and they are about an inch away from tearing each other to pieces. Once again, people see what's going on the outside in the country. They see it. And when Donald Trump got in power, he really pushed that, okay? But understand, it's not the non-white people. It is the people that support Donald Trump and also the other side. They have a conflict. That's why I tell us, let them duke it out all they want. We just stay out of it, okay? So he stated that Brazil, with all its racial diversity, is completely fractured as a nation where people cannot get along and separate and self-segregate whenever possible. South Africa, with all its diversity, is turning into a bloody backwater as its diversity increases. Black on other black, black on white, white on black, black on Indian, doesn't matter. It's ethnicity versus ethnicity. They all turn on each other in the end. Why is it that what gives Western nations strength, diversity, is not what gives Eastern nations, China, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, their strength? How are they so strong? China said to be the world's most dominant nation in this century while lacking diversity. Well, the Chinese didn't go to everyone's nation and colonize it. The Chinese stayed within their land and just did what they had to do. The Asians didn't, none of them, when you said Taiwan or South Korea, they didn't go trying to colonize other people's nations. That's the difference. That is the difference. You have established your society on needing other people. You didn't stay in Europe and mind your own business and try to just, hey, make Europe great. You had to bring your happy self over here. You had to go gather us up, bring us with you. I mean, blame yourself for that. That's once again, you said it is European men. Well, that's the cause of it. Okay. Now, I do agree with him on this. Unity is strength. And I agree with that 100%. Now, he said radicalization of Western men. He talked about that it's unavoidable, but inevitable. It should be no shock European men in every nation and every continent turn to radical notions and methods of combat the social. So he's talking about the radicalization of them, which we see in it every day. They call it red pill. That's what they're calling it, but when you hear them saying they're red pilled, they're radicalized. Okay. So, I'm not going to read all through this crap that he's talking about. Let me see. The failure of assimilation, expecting immigrants to assimilate to a dying, decadent culture is laughable. So, they want people to assimilate. They're talking about green nationalism, only true nationalism, we keep going through that. Now, he's going through kill high-profile enemies, and he's talking about different ways of doing so. He mentioned Angela Merkel. He said, of all things, anti-white, anti-dramatic is the top of the list. He's mentioning Erdogan. He said one of the oldest enemies of our people. He talks about him, and he's talking about Sadiq Khan, which is the mayor of London. He's talking about the paradox of diverse equality. He's mentioning that. He said the president is a gift from those in our past. We just kind of just going through that. He's just kind of rambling on. Soldiers fight. The danger of the invader. Anybody that come in, he just run off at the mouth. More run off at the mouth. Populist movements. He said emotions rule over facts. He said stop trying to persuade the general population with statistics charts. Say it was 1.7 percentage point difference may mean something to a few, but ingenuously worded expression or brilliantly crafted poster will convince the many. So he's just, doing more and more whining, no profits for anti-whites. Now, this is interesting. You say for those, for too long, those who have profited most from the importation of cheap labor have gone unpunished. The economic elites who line their pockets with the profit received from our own ethnic replacement, these greed-filled bastards expect to replace our people with a race of low intellect, low agency, muddied masses just so their own wealth and power can increase. That's exactly what they done to y'all. They doing it right here in the United States. And you know what? I'm just sitting back watching the show. They will soon realize there are repercussions to being race traitors. Their repercussions will hit them hard, fast, and without mercy. If they flee, we will follow them. If they hide, we will find them. If they try to shield themselves behind the state, we will break through and reach them. If an individual is in ownership or control of a corporation or business, advocates or even accept the mass importation of non-whites to replace the native European populations, then that traitor must be destroyed. Oh boy, I tell you, they see the violence. See, so, all these so-called CEOs, you need to do something about these people, these red pill people that's talking about. And remember, the red pill is their radicalization message. It's they protect your people, remove the poison, talking about using drugs. He said illegal drug dealers are our racial enemies. That's very interesting. They call them our racial enemies. He said Europe for Europeans. Not only if you believed in that mantra, Europe for Europeans, Africa for Africa, Asian for Asians, then maybe things would probably go better for you. But You can't go to people's land, steal their resources, kill people, and do all the things that you ever done, enslave people, and think it's going to work out well. I mean, we talking about this concerning what he's talking about. As you can see, he's just run off of the mouth some more. He says, never wise to become a minority group. Now, this is interesting because, they always talk about, minorities, but they don't want to be the minority. Okay, they say in every country, on every continent, those that are in the minority are oppressed. If you become a social, political, or ethnic minority, it will always lead to your oppression. Whether they are a political minority and therefore lose control of the majority of power and thus lose control of the laws and regulations that define public life, or those that are the cultural minority find that art in its forms is created and controlled by a different audience, from a different people, from a different history, with different ideals and experiences, and therefore they find themselves isolated, excluded, and removed from the creation of contemporary culture. Those that find themselves born linguistically, those that find themselves born linguistically in the minority suffer daily as a conversion. Oh my God. As the conversation of life excludes them, the mass media isolates them, and businesses turn them away, as does society's speech itself. Finally, there are those that find themselves in the ethnic or racial minority and find their very own genes being bred out of existence through miscegenation and differing racial birth rates. The same people will find themselves gradually less and less represented both politically and culturally, becoming essentially foreigners in their own land. Minorities are never treated well. Do not become one. So basically what he's saying is all minorities are oppressed, and if we become a minority, we're going to be oppressed too. Well, coming from a black person, we could talk about that. I don't look at myself as a minority, but we talk about just that particular position. It's not nice, and I guess, your turn coming up, bro. That's all it is to it. I mean, we can't be like that forever. I mean, somebody else got to get their turn on that oppression wheel. He said, don't let your enemies grow unchecked. And he talked about that. Don't leave the cities. Run toward the fight, not away. Now, let's talk about just that right there. Okay. We know it's been a mass push for gentrification. And they're running to the cities. They're trying to claim all the black areas that they can to take the city over. We talked about the story with Inglewood, etc. Right? And they want to be in the cities, and they're trying to push black people out of the suburbs. But it's interesting that he says about don't leave the cities. Interesting. Talking about support your brother nations, accept death, embrace infancy, numbers on everything. Talking about that. Birth rates must eventually be addressed at all costs. And let me tell you something. You say without children, there's no future. Right. But what he's not addressing, and let's call it what it is many things that really affects their birth rates. Not only feminism, which we talked about earlier, LGBTQ. That affects their birth rates because if you aren't having children, then you can't produce. Now, some people may say, well, I can adopt, but that's not the same as a man and a woman having, children. This guy's saying they need to have 2 to 3 kids each woman. And a lot of women, these days aren't having children. Sometimes for career. She can be a career-oriented woman and want to have a child in her late 30s and may have one. Sometimes within, his group. We're not talking about us. So they can't fix that issue. It's the kind of thing as once things are allowed to change, you can't reel it back in unless you do something very, very drastic to get that back in. So there's no democratic solution. He said you can't vote your way out of ethnic replacement. He said then, he talking about it basically. We say voting is mob rule and mob rule is media rule. And media rule is corporate rule. So, he already trying to say here that you can't talk with anybody. You got to be violent. That's just what he's saying. He said NGOs are directly involved in the genocide of European people. Now, NGOs are non-government organizations. He's blaming them. He blamed his own people, but eventually he blames everybody else. He's talking about NGOs. He said if you lose, history will write you as monsters, regardless of your tactics. Win first, write the narrative later. That's exactly what they have done. So that's why they don't want to be in the minority. They don't want even history corrected. Okay, so he said anyone can be a German, a Brit, a Frenchman, then being European has truly lost its meaning. So basically what he's saying is, paraphrasing, that if an African person can become a citizen of the UK, if an Arab person can become a citizen of Estonia, then they're considered European by citizenship. So it's kind of like what he's getting at here. You say the time after the baby boomers have passed isn't the time to start acting, but the time we should be finishing our victory. He's talking about all that. Let me see what here. That we wait until the majority of boomers begin to pass between 2028 and 30. Look, the baby boomers are already kind of going that way. Talking about their leaders. More run off at the mouth. Talking about do nothing, win nothing, achieve nothing. We're not going to keep reading all his crap. Even though we are going through the stabilization and accelerationism, tax for victory. Let me see what he says. True change and the change we need to enact. Just kind of looking at something. He said canvass public areas in support of radical positions, even if they are not your own. Incite conflict. Place posters near public parks calling for Sharia law. Then in the next week, place posters over such posts calling for expulsion of all immigrants. Repeat in all areas of public life until the crisis arrives, destabilize, and take control. He's talking about tactics that they use. He said a vote for a radical candidate that oppresses your values and incites agitation or anxiety in your own people works far more than in your favor than to vote for a malcontous political candidate that has no ability or wish to enact radical change. So as you can see, there's more things to not be a good citizen and to be violent, as we can see. He's talking about globalized capitalist markets are the enemy of racial autonomous. He talks about that. He said break the back of cheap labor. He said cheap labor, slave labor, refuse to import modern slaves. So basically what he's saying is that all the people that's bringing in the people from over the border, he's saying it's slave labor. Okay. A boil over in the melting pot, civil war in the so-called melting pot, that is United States should be a major aim in overthrowing the global power structure in the West. Okay. So he definitely wants civil war. He said the United States is in turmoil, more so than any other time in history. States hate other states. Electoral college under attack at every turn, and the racists are at each other's throats. On top of this is a two-party political system split by racial, social, cultural, linguistic, and class divides. The end result is a nation in gridlock, unable to respond to any great change, unable to commit to any great projects, a political and social stalemate that makes any advancement impossible. Okay? So he's, like I said, once again, he's recognizing that. He said, meanwhile, the 10,000-ton boulder of demographic change rolls over forward, gaining momentum and possibly destroying all in its path. Eventually, when the white population of the USA realized the truth of the situation, war will erupt. Soon the replacement of the whites within Texas will hit its apogee, and with the non-white political and social control of Texas, and with this control, the Electoral College will be heavily stacked in favor of a Democratic victory, so that every electoral cycle will be certainty. He said after election cycle 2 with a Democratic victory, those remaining non-Democratic voting, non-brainwashed whites will see the future clear before them. And with this knowledge, realize the impossibility of a diplomatic or political victory within a short time. Widespread political, social, and racial violence will commence in attempts to conflict or where there will be a strike. A strong, unified, ethnically and culturally focused pro-white, pro-European group would be the average white family. So basically what he's saying is, we are at each other's throats, which, like I said, we talked about that before. That is true. Now, what I'm trying to tell black people is to stay out of their way. Let them deal with each other, because you see how at their throats we are. You have to stop interjecting yourself. Don't put on your cape for none of them, okay? Just make sure you won't say that. As we go down, no taxes to anti-white states. He's talking about that. Talking about refusing to pay taxes. That's interesting. He said section 4 conclusion. As we scroll through that, then he's showing all his pictures there. He wants, and this is the thing. Maybe he could have had this picture right here if he would have married him a girl, a white woman, and tried to have some children. Maybe he could have had him a little white son, right? If he wouldn't have went and killed people. But no, he's so worried about everybody else. You posting all these pictures, and they constantly do this, post these kind of pictures of white children. You have to create families to have children, man. I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, so in all, through this manifesto, let me recap real quick what we learned. Birth rates is a major talking point for them. They are afraid of dying out. They are afraid of it, okay? That is like one of the things they're afraid of. Radicalization of Western men is something that they're really pushing. And when you hear them talking about they've been red pilled, as radicalization, okay? We know Candace Owens' name came up in this, which we know Candace Owens is very, very dangerous. We also know that they're paying attention to the division in the United States of America. They feel that the people are going to be at each other's throats, so I'm going to jump off. I mean, that's what, if you listen to a lot of the white supremacists, they want that, really bad, because they don't know how to solve their problems. You got to think about it. They got Trump and they're still complaining, right? I thought Trump was supposed to be their, savior, and he's not. Trump is not their savior at all. So what I'm saying out of all this is, he can get mad all he wants. He can cry. He can whine. But the inevitable is just here. I mean, the curtain is closing, and it's nothing that, nobody can do for you. I mean, you can be violent all you want. And I would tell you this, and I can guarantee you this. You kill one person, God will multiply them by 10, especially you targeting us. I promise you that. So don't ever think that you're going to target us and then we're going to go away. They have tried everything they could to wipe us out, and we've always done nothing but multiply. So you're getting this here first, guys, with this manifesto. We took our time to go through this. Like I said, we're not going to read every word, but we wanted to hit the points of this manifesto and get into the mindset of how they think. Now that we know, their tactics, what everything they're doing, we can review that and understand that we're dealing with, something in our country that is, I told you guys before, a cancer, a major, major cancer for us to deal with. But like I said, if you haven't subscribed to this particular channel, the Advised Media Network channel, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you also like it, the video, share it with your friends, share it with your family. But we're trying to put out the information so you can learn who we're all dealing with. Because understand something, even if you are a white person listening to this video, these kind of people will target you too if you don't agree with them. Understand that. So, yes, we're talking to a lot of black people, but he mentioned about race traders. So you should be concerned as well. But like I said, thank you guys for listening, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think.